Hello and welcome to the Slate Political Gabfest. March 23rd, 2023, the Will Be Arrested on Tuesday of Next Week edition. I am David Plotz of CityCast in Washington, D.C., joined, of course, by Emily Bazelon of the New York Times Magazine and Yale University Law School from New Haven. Hello, Emily.
Hey, David.
And by John Dickerson of CBS Primetime from New York. Hello, John.
Hello. Good morning, David and Emily. I probably shouldn't timestamp when I say good morning, but it's morning where we are, so there you go.
This week on the Gabfest, will former President Trump be criminally charged over his hush money payoff to Stormy Daniels? What about over his absconding with top secret documents? We'll discuss, should he be criminally charged also? Then, what's happening in France, and can I retire at 62? We will talk to the Paris-based journalist Rachel Donadio about the plight of Emmanuel Macron and the plight of elderly French people, too, which seems like not much of a plight. It seems really good to be an elderly French person. Then people cannot stop talking about ChatGPT and other large language model AIs. How will they change us? John and Emily will explain it to me. Plus, of course, we will have cocktail chatter. Tuesday came and went. Donald Trump was not arrested or indicted or criminally charged, despite his posting that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. But many signs suggest that Trump will be criminally charged in New York State, one of the 4 or possibly 5, I'm having a hard time counting, criminal investigations he's facing for various deplorable acts, both public and private. On Wednesday came even more Trump criminal legal drama with the appeals court, the federal appeals court in D.C., ordering a Trump lawyer, Evan Corcoran, to turn over his notes from conversations with Trump about the missing documents or the secreted classified documents in Mar-a-Lago, with the court saying that the crime fraud exemption, which Emily is so excited to explain, that the crime fraud exemption overrode any claim of Corcoran's attorney-client privilege. So, Emily, let's start with the New York one first. Who is likely to charge him in New York and for what?
Alvin Bragg, who is the district attorney for New York in Manhattan, has indicated that he seems to be moving toward an indictment in the hush money affair involving Stormy Daniels. So this is the issue in which Michael Cohen, who was Trump's lawyer and fixer, pleaded guilty to fraud, basically, and lying and trying to influence the election in arranging this payoff. And Trump is the principal in the story, and he had not been federally charged. And indeed, the federal prosecutors decided not to pursue charges against him. Alvin Bragg seems to be looking at violations of New York law, starting with falsifying business records. And so this is this idea that the payoff to Stormy Daniels was supposed to be for legal services, that was sort of the claim that was made, and that when Trump then repaid Cohen, who was the person who actually paid Daniels, the prosecutors would have to prove that Trump knew that he was falsifying business records. That's a misdemeanor in New York. In order to make it a felony, the charges have to get linked to another crime. And that seems kind of complicated. I mean, the obvious idea is that Trump was in some way trying to influence the election himself. Why else bother to pay off Stormy Daniels right before the election? And then you could have some kind of violation of campaign finance law. But the statutes are kind of murky, and it doesn't seem like prosecutors in New York have done this before. And so that's the sort of question mark about the indictment itself, what shape it will take and how it will hold up in court.
Emily, you said that Bragg had suggested he might indict. What gave you the indication that he thought he might indict?
Well, they invited Trump to come testify before the grand jury.
But that's not Bragg actually doing it. It's just us interpreting that if you're a target and you get asked to testify, that's usually a precursor to actually being indicted. But he didn't actually say anything. The only reason I'm asking for that distinction is the press has gone absolutely bonkers in covering this. And much of it is because Trump is yanking their chain, which is a repeat of all of the chain yanking he did for the last 6 years. And it seems like he's basically done it again. He yanks the press's chain. Now, he added to that by saying he was going to get arrested. But then he gets everybody whipped up, gets all this coverage, and then he raises money off of the coverage. which then, is either, if you see it one way, it's a part of his grift, or it's just a part of his just ever-churning self-aggrandizement scheme, which may be part of the same thing. And that's why it sort of interests me how we all got to this place and what the initiating thing was. And I guess it was the assumption that inviting Trump was a precursor to indicting him.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Basically, in New York, it's customary, and this isn't true everywhere, that if you're going to indict someone, you first ask them if they want to testify before the grand jury. And then, of course, nobody does, because that would be really not in your interest to do as the defendant, to have to answer questions before the charges have proceeded and you're actually on trial. But right, I mean, Bragg could still decide not to. And there is skepticism about this particular set of charges. What I keep thinking about is that the investigations of Trump involving the classified and secret documents at Mar-a-Lago, which we should talk more about, and then the, January 6th insurrection, and then the idea of whether he was trying to force the election to swing to him in Georgia with his call to Brad Raffensperger. All those different investigations are meatier and weightier than the hush money payoffs to Stormy Daniels. Doesn't mean that he didn't commit a misdemeanor or possibly a felony in the hush money scenario as well. But there's something odd about the idea that the hush money payoffs are going to be, it has the kind of feeling of like, charging Al Capone for tax evasion. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen at all or that it'll be the only thing, but the laser focus on it at the moment is kind of strange.
Just reminding, the major focus is all Trump's doing. I mean, this is why he is an evil genius in a lot of ways. Take the weakest thing against you, claim that's what is being, you're being railroaded for. Do it before you have any actual charges, despite the fact that lots of lawyers are going on TV talking about the charges and what the indictment is, even though there is no indictment. And that allows every Republican to then defend Trump, not on the merits of the thing, because there are no charges. We can't respond to an indictment that hasn't taken place. Nevertheless, they spend all this time talking about how Bragg's indictment, which hasn't happened yet, is a total political act, which gives them a safe place to be outraged. And this is all constructed by Donald Trump. And the people who spent the last 6 years being led around by him are being led around by him again. It's extraordinary.
Well, if you're right about that, I think Bragg's office is kind of playing into this. And then there's this related same play going on, John, in Georgia, where there is no indictment. There isn't even a criminal grand jury. There's a report from a civil grand jury. And Trump's lawyers are trying to quash that. And having like serious best defense is an offense play there, which is sort of also puzzling, except that then you have this problem where the grand jurors started talking to the press, which like really is not helpful for whatever investigation that district attorney might be doing. So it's sort of, there's a lot of messiness.
Let's turn to the other case. I mean, we can stay on the New York one, but the crime fraud exemption situation is fascinating. Here in D.C., a judge in D.C. has ordered Evan Corcoran, a judge, incidentally, I should note, who is my cousin. Beryl Howell is my cousin. She's a federal judge here in D.C. I've never talked to her about this case. She has ordered Evan Corcoran, who's a Trump lawyer, to turn over what, Emily?
Oh, she has ordered him, it looks like, to turn over his notes and maybe audio tapes he made of talking to Donald Trump. And this is super unusual, right? So we have this rule called attorney-client privilege. The idea is that you go and talk to your lawyer. You're allowed to be as honest as possible because your lawyer's never going to have to divulge what you said, like even after you die. And this is like really supposed to be in almost all circumstances, this ironclad protection. And the idea is that people need to be honest with their lawyers and able to get the best legal advice. And that's part of how our adversarial system operates. However, there is an exception, the crime fraud exception. And what it says is that if there is evidence that you were talking to the lawyer in the course of planning a crime or committing a crime, then a judge can pierce, it's called attorney-client privilege, and make that lawyer talk about what you said. That is so unusual. It really doesn't happen very much. And the idea that there is evidence of an underlying crime here, nobody has said exactly what it is, or even that necessarily Donald Trump committed it himself. But it is really rare and a very big deal for Evan Corcoran to have to turn over his notes, his recollections of these conversations, and any audio tapes he have. has of talking to Trump about these documents at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, this is like serious popcorn time.
He's not just a person you told, I'm going to go shoot Joe, and you tell your lawyer. It's help me pull the trigger to shoot Joe is the distinction I'm trying to make. The second thing is the fact that they mention audio recordings, A, that there are audio recordings is amazing. B, doesn't that mean that that Trump's lawyer has essentially at least told DOJ something about what he has? I mean, in other words, is audio recording something you always just put on the form, or is it something that they would probably know he has? I guess that's one of the great questions.
It suggests that they think he has it. I mean, I can't say that for sure, but it suggests that. And yeah, it suggests they know enough about these conversations that they think that there is a reason to break this almost ironclad rule with someone extremely prominent and famous, right? I mean, you don't go around doing this in any normal case, and to do it in this particular case is really quite something.
And so the status of it, Emily, is that Judge Howell told Corcoran he had to do it. Trump and Corcoran was preparing this materials to hand it over. The Trump folks appealed. The D.C. Circuit, the Federal Appeals Court in D.C., did it extremely expedited, super fast, amazingly fast, one-day review of this, and had everybody brief it and reviewed it and said, no, you got to go ahead. So Corcoran now has to go ahead, but I gather that the Trump folks do still have the right to appeal this to the Supreme Court, and that if ultimately the prosecution loses on appeal, they will not be able to use any of this material. In fact, will have taken their investigation down a dead end and won't even be able to use anything that they learned from it, right?
Right. I mean, they can appeal to the Supreme Court. It's pretty unusual for the United States Supreme Court to interfere in this kind of back and forth between the trial court and the appellate court, but it could happen. And yeah, I mean, if the Justice Department ends up barred from piercing attorney-client privilege, then they wouldn't be able to use the materials.
Another thing to throw in the soup here is whether the Department of Justice has made the case or thinks, or anybody thinks, and the idea would be the reason everybody's moving so damn fast is that there's maybe the possibility that Trump might still have classified documents. In other words, one of the reasons you would want to hurry up and go is if you thought there was an ongoing national security threat. Now, this is total speculation, and put me back in the box, Emily, if there are other reasons to go quickly. But isn't one of the mysteries why everybody's being asked to march forward so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. As I understand it, one set of lawyers had until 6 a.m. to respond to an order that they got the previous evening, which is like, what? Sure. I mean, it's also possible that the courts just got fed up with how much stonewalling and stalling there has been, particularly on the side of Trump's lawyers, but it is expedited to the point of kind of like craziness. I mean, there are just so many unusual things about this case. It's just, I really am fascinated by it.
Listeners, I wish you could see the smile on Emily's face. Emily's, not that she's taking pleasure in anyone's criminal misbehavior, but just the legal Rube Goldbergness of this is giving Emily so much pleasure.
You know what this is, David? This is a brokered convention.
Yes, it's for lawyers. It's the lawyer version of a brokered convention. Exactly.
I mean, I also should explain, I co-taught sort of a class on professional responsibility last semester with Doug Nejame, a friend of mine who is an amazing professional responsibility expert. I was there as like the journalist. We were comparing the rules and laws that govern lawyers to the rules and fewer laws that govern journalists. And Doug was really teaching the class. And so I learned a lot. I learned all kinds of things that I barely learned or never learned in law school. And one of the things we talked a lot about was the crime fraud exception. So that's part of why I'm so excited about it.
John, can we just wrap this a little bit on the politics of it? So as far as Trump as a presidential candidate goes, what's your take on how all these criminal investigations affect his campaign, affect coverage of him, affect the race? I mean, as you've already said, it has made him the center of attention again. We've chased the rabbit down the track again. So where do you think it plays out in terms of the election as it starts to heat up?
Yeah, and again, the distinction I would make is it's the crime fraud exemption that Emily talked about, the actions of the appeals court, the actions of the special counsel that are all actually happening, not rumors about things happening, but actually happening. That's news, and that's worth covering, and that's interesting. What's happening in New York with the DA is speculation about a thing that hasn't happened and that's being whipped up and stage managed by the candidate. And to me, that's a crucial distinction in the way to pay attention to Donald Trump. There's a rallying around him. It's absolutely whipping up the fervor of those who think that Trump, as their representative, is chased after and penalized, and he's running his next campaign as kind of grievance squared. I mean, it's the first one was built on grievance. This one is built even more so on grievance. But, 4 or 5 serious legal proceedings might be more than Donald Trump can even overcome. And also, once some of this stuff comes out, particularly on the classified documents, if there is crime here and what he's got is serious, then a lot of the lawmakers in Washington who are rushing into this very useful political space right now where they can claim Bragg is a political operator, but not have to wrestle with the specifics of the case. I think in the documents case, they would have to wrestle with the specifics of the case. January 6th has additional complications that are harder to get around, and have less to do with Trump, but have to do with other values that lawmakers profess to have, and that would be difficult to hold those two in the same time. So I think that does create some complexity. But you can't beat something with nothing. And Ron DeSantis is bouncing around, but he sort of stepped in it on Ukraine, and he's taken on Donald Trump, who is very good at political fighting, and the ways in which DeSantis has taken on Trump so far have not been that clever or creative. So just one small dumb thing. This is dumb and dumb and dumb, but politics is sometimes super dumb. DeSantis had a conversation with Piers Morgan and said, the nickname he calls me Ron Sanctimonious. I don't even know how to spell that word. He went to Harvard and Yale. Donald Trump could easily come forward and say, he doesn't know how to spell sanctimonious. That's funny because he went to Harvard and Yale. You'd think somebody who went to Harvard and Yale knows how to spell sanctimonious and would repeat the word sanctimonious 75 times, right? And in so doing, say essentially, Ron DeSantis is a phony telling you something he doesn't know that of course he knows. And then he would say, and what does sanctimonious means? It means taking the high moral position sort of performatively, which of course is what DeSantis is doing, saying, well, I don't know what this word means, but I'm just focused on governing. It's just, if you're going to fight Donald, again, this is all stupid, but stupid is running the show right now. And if you're going to fight Donald Trump, that it seems to me is not a signal that you're going to beat him up decisively.
Slate Plus members can get a bonus segment by becoming a Slate Plus member by going to slate.com/Gabfest Plus. And today we have a great Slate Plus to talk about, very apropos. It's why has Iowa, sweet, tolerant, civil Iowa, become such a deep red state? How did that happen? We will talk about that. And you can get that if you were a Slate Plus member. You can also get no ads on any Slate podcast, bonus segments on lots of Slate podcasts, and even bonus episodes on some Slate podcasts by going to slate.com/Gabfest Plus. This episode is brought to you by Saks.com. Saks.com editors are always tracking the top styles that are trending right now. Tailored blazers and midi dresses are selling out at Saks.com, especially from brands like Veronica Beard and The Row. And Saks.com editors are seeing Loewe's oversized tote on the streets of New York, Milan, and Paris. If you want your own free personalized trend recommendations, Saks.com stylists can do that and more. Plus, there's free shipping and returns all the time at Saks.com. I want to tell you about another podcast that I think you should be listening to. We are living through a wild moment in American history. Conspiracy theorists on House committees, extremists on the Supreme Court, near fistfights on C-SPAN. But history is not finished, and we can change its course for the better by staying informed and taking action, big or small. Crooked Media's Pod Save America is hosted by 4 former Obama aides, Jon Favreau, John Lovett, Dan Pfeiffer, and Tommy Vietor. They worked in government and now use their expertise to provide listeners with a no bullshit guide to democracy. Every week, they break down all the political news that makes us laugh, cry, and scream into the void to help us figure out what matters and what each of us can do about it. They take you behind the scenes as they talk to politicians, activists, artists, and journalists. And they have a lot of fun while they're doing it. Pod Save America is news with action items. They give you the tools you need so you can do your part and stay in the fight. Find Pod Save America wherever you get your podcasts. Emmanuel Macron's government survived 2 no-confidence votes, but nationwide protests continue against his wildly unpopular plan to force through a hike in the retirement age, the French retirement age, from 62 to 64. Americans live 16 years after our retirements on average, and we can thus only marvel at the French, who live 25 years in retirement and enjoy the hell out of it. We are joined by the brilliant Paris-based journalist Rachel Donadio to talk about what's happening in France and to talk about the French retirement. So, Rachel, first of all, what do you get when you retire in France at 62? Does everyone get it? What kind of life does it allow you to leave?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that we should, I know there is tremendous American envy of France and this idea that people just live better in France. And I think that we need to establish some basic facts here, which is that Emmanuel Macron's proposed or now pushed through pension reform means that you will now you can retire at 64 instead of 62 after having worked for 43 years minimum. And when you do retire, the average is usually people get about 75% of their earnings pre-retirement. And France actually has a pretty high level of retirement income compared to your salary before you retired. That being said, in France, you don't have a lot of private pensions like 401ks that we have in the United States. So standards of living for retirees tend to be pretty high because their retirement take home isn't that much tremendously lower than their previous salary. But the cost of living has been increasing and life expectancy has also been increasing. And so all of these things combine to create part of the mess that we're in now.
Emmanuel Macron is pushing through the increase in the retirement age. So I guess just, Rachel, walk us through what's happening and the nature of that debate. And is it really actually a debate about something else? You know, the way in which couples, when they argue, sometimes the thing they're arguing about is actually not it. It's really like a slight from a month before. Is there any way in which this is really a proxy war that's better understood as a fight over X? And what is X?
Yes, X is many things. It is the fight that it's why didn't you unload the dishwasher, that is really about what is the nature of this country and the social welfare system and the economy and life on earth as we know it. A lot of things are going on here. The issue isn't really so much the raising of the retirement age by 2 years, although that is definitely a factor. The issue is really how Macron did this. This was supposed to be a key piece of his legislation, and he crammed it through with an executive order, which is basically a massive political failing of the most basic kind. You don't go to a vote if you don't have the numbers. And this has become, like so many things in the Macron presidency, essentially a referendum on Macron. And people, many, many people, do not like this guy. And these giant demonstrations, the words that are most often heard are mépris, contempt. They feel that he has contempt for the French people, that the government has contempt. They're not listening to what the people want. And also malentendu, a misunderstanding. We didn't understand what the pension reform is really about. They didn't sell it well. And so that is also what's going on. You have to remember that the office of the presidency of France, Macron's office, the role of president, has a tremendous amount of executive power, but he actually doesn't have a huge amount of political clout in ways at the moment because he has a minority government. He won re-election last April with a solid majority. But after that, there were legislative elections. And so he didn't do very well in those. And the far right and the far left gained more seats. So he is governing with a minority of seats in the 577-member National Assembly. That means that he's governing in some ways not in coalition, but in kind of concert with a center-right party called Les Républicains. Those guys campaigned in 2019 wanting to raise the retirement age to 65. And yet, many of them in the vote didn't show up to back the pension reform. Why? Because they're in disarray, because politics, because they don't want to look bad, because it's not a popular thing. So I think Emmanuel Macron is in many ways one of the smartest and one of the dumbest politicians on the world stage today. He is smart in the sense that he has a remarkable, brilliant command of policy. He has Obama-level command of policy. He can debate anybody in the world on issues and debate them under the table until their eyes bleed. That being said, he lacks some of the most basic political instincts that city council members anywhere on earth would have. Building alliances, building coalitions, making sure people are on board, listening to people. And so that has always been a fundamental challenge of this presidency.
That is such a helpful analysis and set of facts that you're giving us. And I just want to go back to a point you made about how Macron's doing this all by himself. So he's doing that because of a law that was passed when Charles de Gaulle became the leader of the country that allows, as I understand it, a law to become law without a vote of parliament. And then the only remedy Parliament has, if the leadership pushes this through, is the no confidence vote that Macron nearly lost. I mean, just structurally, that is like completely in tandem with not listening. I mean, it's basically, I don't have a majority of votes. I haven't convinced the legislature, the elected branch of government, to support my plan, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it just seems like part of the root of the trouble here. And it helps me understand why young people would be against this, right? For sort of procedural as well as substantive reasons, which otherwise is puzzling because, you know, they're the ones economically who stand to benefit from this kind of change, right?
I think young people understand that they're going to have to work long, a lot of years. I think that's not really the issue. But in choosing this constitutional measure, it's an executive order. It's like you push it through by executive order. And so you only resort to that if you really want to do this, but without the majority. He thought he had the numbers. His prime minister, Elisabeth Borne, had to go out and rally the troops and try to build consensus. The job of the prime minister of France is essentially to take the heat for all of the problems and to be hung out to dry when seen as no longer effective. It's also confusing. People don't quite understand, like, wait, why do we need this? It was something he wanted to do before the pandemic, and there were a lot of protests then, and then the pandemic hit. I have to say that France handled the pandemic extremely well. The fact that he used this executive order also feeds into another distressing development in France and across the West, which shares political weather patterns, which is this sense that democracy is not working. And the people feel like their elected officials are not listening. And so a lot of people think now that abstention will be higher. We don't believe in the system anymore. Probably higher French abstention would be even lower than average US voter turnouts. Nevertheless, in Europe, which emerged from the Second World War and values democratic institutions and democracy and the republic very much, there is this sense that if your elected officials aren't, you don't believe in them anymore, like something is really quite broken. And that, of course, fuels the far right, which Marine Le Pen in last year's election got 42% of the vote. That is huge. I traveled around the French countryside before the second round of elections, and I did a piece for the New York Times opinion section. The headline was Marine Le Pen has already won. And I stand by that headline because she has grassroots support and she's seen as listening and she wants to keep the retirement age lower. So it's really about so many different things, but using an executive order to pass what's supposed to be a piece of hallmark legislation feeds this sense that democracy isn't working. Now, Macron gave a television interview yesterday. He said, guys, this was debated ad nauseum in the National Assembly. Modifications were made to the law. It's the democratic process. This is how it works. And he isn't entirely wrong. But the fact that somehow he is seen as this arrogant, imperious, mansplaining leader, Jupiter from on high, he cannot seem to shake that, and everything he says contributes to that. I don't think he's on the wrong side of history, but he is not managing to sell this to the people.
Rachel, I'm reminded of George Bush's Gambit, which failed to move Social Security into private accounts after he won in 2004, which he said, in an election, you win capital, and then now I'm going to go spend some. It was a noble gambit, even if you didn't believe in the underlying policy, because it suggested you take risks for the future that aren't going to really help you in the moment. Nobody does that anymore, in part because of his failure. Why is Macron doing this? Is it based on the same kind of thing? Because what's the upside of making this change? I mean, I know the way he thinks the math works as a matter of the pension system, but why is he really doing it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think he's really doing it because of the math. He's the guy who's like, I'm looking at the numbers. Life expectancy in France is 82.5. France spends 14.5% of its GDP on pensions. That's compared to 7.5% in the United States. People are living longer, and it makes sense. It has to be something incremental. But as you know, in politics, it's hard to sell. It's just hard to sell that. Anyone who touches Social Security is not going to be very popular. But that's also, in fact, his arrogance. He is not afraid of being disliked. And that is actually, in some ways, an asset, because he said in a television interview, I am not afraid of being unpopular. I am not going to be reelected. He cannot run for office again. He can just do this. And I think all countries in Europe need to do the math. Economists are not entirely convinced by this reform. It's a huge political cost for something that's ultimately fairly incremental, which again speaks to the political failure here. But economists also think there should be something that's a little bit more progressive or graduated, or if you're a white collar worker and you're earning more, maybe you should work longer and that will put more into the system, as opposed to if you're, doing a manual labor and your body is going to give out, you can retire younger after those 43 years of contributions. That was raised from 41.5 under the socialist President Hollande with the support of some unions. So it is not impossible to do this. It just speaks to the challenges that Macron has had.
I mean, all those nuances you're bringing up there seem really important. And it strikes me, I don't know if tragedy is the right word, but so you have this technocrat who's trying to do something that he sees as important for the long-term economic well-being of the country. It doesn't sound like he's doing it perfectly or even that well policy-wise, but he's trying. And then he's completely blowing the politics of it, which maybe is fine because, like you said, he doesn't have to run for re-election, except that there's Marine Le Pen waiting in the wings and this problem of, right-wing ascendancy when people feel like something's being taken from them. I mean, that seems like the huge risk of this misstep here.
When Macron ran for office and won in 2017, he's kind of a fluke, a kind of an anomaly of history. He ran by doing an end run around the existing center-right and center-left parties. The Socialist Party, which he belonged to, he was the finance minister in Hollande's socialist government. He left the party understanding that the ship is sinking. The party has fewer votes than ever before in its history. And also the center-right Republican Party, that candidate, François Fillon, he was supposed to win, but there was a fairly low-level corruption scandal, and he was not a viable candidate. So Macron emerges. He absorbs all the votes from the center-right and the center-left. It's his movement. But that being said, he doesn't have roots. He doesn't really have a base. His base are readers of the Financial Times and people who are looking at the numbers. And, that being said, okay, he won the vote with a majority. But it's not like he can tap into a network of mayors across France and say, guys, bang the drum for me. He does not have that kind of grassroots support. And Marine Le Pen is the oldest, not in age, she has been around longer than the leaders of any other party in France right now, almost. And so I don't necessarily think people will believe that she can run the country. That being said, she absorbs a lot of the support in rural areas and among people who feel like, as we said, things used to be better. And she's the vote for we want things to be what they used to be. It's weird. He's the radical. And then the resistance to that is, what do we want? Status quo. The real challenge to Macron is that in absorbing the center-right and the center-left, there's nothing else out there. There really isn't. He's kind of just absorbed everything. And the people associated with him are going to be tainted by this unpopular reform, and that'll make it hard for them. And so it's really unclear what comes afterwards.
Rachel Donadio is a journalist in Paris. Rachel, thank you so much. This was incredibly enlightening across a wide swath of France.
Thanks so much for having me.
Our nation has a love-hate relationship with argument. A lot of us love to argue, but even more of us hate the results. Our politics seem stuck in the mud, and many of our self-appointed thought leaders are reducing the great debates of our time to shouting matches. And it's not just in politics, it's art, it's culture. Thoughtful discussion is missing almost everywhere in our lives. But you'll find it on Hear Me Out, Slate's new podcast. I'm your host, Celeste Headlee. Each week, we'll bring you an insightful guest with a challenging point of view and engage them in an honest, good faith dialogue without partisan cliches.
It's human life. If it's that important to you, you have to put your money where your mouth is.
Often the police don't do anything to resolve the questions that you call them for, and yet we are taught that the police are the only people we can call.
Everything that Ben Shapiro is going to say is not necessarily good, but the best way to prove that a bad idea is bad is not by refusing to talk about it.
We'll talk, we'll listen, and we'll ask the hard questions that bring out the best answers from all sides on issues that matter to the world and to you. That's every Tuesday on Slate's Hear Me Out with me, Celeste Headlee. Starting on March 21st, join us wherever you listen.
We talked about ChatGPT once a few months ago, but it has now completely colonized the minds of almost everyone in tech and everywhere else as well. I feel like it makes the mania about crypto or the metaverse seem really trivial by comparison. The hyperbolic claims for generative AI are astonishing, that it's going to change everything. But I have to confess that after reading a bunch of articles about it and playing around a little bit with ChatGPT, I do not get it. It doesn't feel like magic to me. But I'm sure I am wrong. And now I'm going to ask John and Emily to explain what they are engaged by and why this is so important. So you guys go ahead, and I'll poke in occasionally with interesting questions. But what is it that has colonized your brains about this?
Well, I'm reluctant to have my brains colonized. I mean, in my family, where people are way ahead of me on this, I said a couple weeks ago, can you just wake me up when this is over? And they all said, are you kidding, Mom? Like, this isn't going to be over. Good luck with that. So I think what's happening is that these large language models, as they're called, are rapidly getting better. And it's not that right now they're so amazing and can do my job or take over the world, but they look like they're heading in that direction. And so I guess to me, there are a few things that are interesting. One is how helpful they could be. Like, could they really support our lives in ways that really improve human existence by just kind of taking out some of the friction of dealing with systems and errands and all the things that drive us crazy? Could they just be like the best personal assistant in the world? That's one lovely scenario. Another interesting question is, with GPT-4 or whatever comes next, can you figure out how to write questions and prompts for it that really improves your own working life if you're a knowledge worker? Like, could my writing and reporting be significantly better because it's helping me along the way? Different kind of help than the logistics help. And then the third question is whether they're going to leap beyond human control, take over the world, and lead to human extinction. Or if not that, some dramatically, radically different kind of universe and human existence than we currently have. And I don't think that's absolutely around the corner, but it seems like there's a small but significant chance that that really could happen. And I don't exactly see why it's not going to happen. So that I find pretty fascinating. John, what about you?
I think you're right. I mean, I think that David is right to be skeptical about, the great new things happening in public conversation, and the fads go away. And certainly Y2K was one of the first times we were introduced to something that was super hyped in the technology area and then didn't come to pass. Of course, some people would say the reason it didn't come to pass is because there was so much attention on the Y2K problem and that was avoided because of all the attention was worthy. But I think this is something slightly different than crypto. I mean, this is, first of all, when you have Bill Gates, who has a pretty good track record on seeing big movements and naming them, and understanding the undulations of technology, when he says this is, as big or bigger than the internet itself, and goes back to Microsoft to basically work on the product selection teams for what Microsoft is going to do with AI, that suggests more than just Matt Damon supporting crypto. Anyway, so I think that's just one way to kind of put the hype in a box. I think Emily's point is right also, which is that artificial intelligence here is moving at a super rapid clip and getting better. And it's doing things like passing bar exams and medical exams, and that's a little bit of a novelty thing, but it also represents the horsepower behind this and the learning capacity behind this. From a personal, and that's getting faster and better. And so as a way of kind of bastardizing Moore's law, which predicted the exponential growth of computing power, there's a pace and an iterative power to ChatGPT that I think is amazing. Finally, personally, I think Emily is 1,000% right, which is that the prompt process is actually, I find, incredibly engaging and wonderful and fertile, and allows you to do thinking with ChatGPT that is super useful for what we do, and I think for what other knowledge workers do. I think also people who seek advice and want a kind of, I'm at a deeply personal level about issues. The ability of ChatGPT now to get it had the ability to get it wrong is incredibly dangerous, but the ability to act as a kind of beginning for some human development, I think is really possibly amazing.
Your claims, your sort of extrapolations about it still feel sort of non-specific to me in a way that I sort of lack the imagination to imagine how is it that in fact it's going to take care of all my errands. I mean, I still actually have to go to the shirt has to get to the dry cleaner. Like,
well, some things are like that, but all the things you do on the internet, right? Like you're planning a vacation, it could rent cars for you. It could find the place to stay. Maybe that's not that different from something a person could do on TaskRabbit.
Here's what, David, imagine it could over the last year look at your email correspondence and the way you've allotted your time without you having to tell it how you've allotted your time, and come up with a conclusion about how you spend your time and how you spend your time most usefully and productively based on the way you've written about it or talked about it. And you would know it's basically any of the metrics. If you ever study your health or anything like that, when you look back at the metrics, it can be incredibly powerful.
I guess I feel like I know there are lots of parts of life which are metrical and analytical, but that fundamentally we're not optimizing in life for productivity or efficiency, that we are optimizing for love and touch and community, and that any thing that imagines a future where those are not the fundamental things that people want human interactions with other humans. They want it in physical spaces with other humans. They want it with people they feel love for because of deep biological, physical connections. And those are like that's the centrality of human existence to me. And so like anything that is a technology that is going to affect me has to speak to those things above all. And I don't understand. And I don't understand how this speaks to those things.
What's one of the great things about friendship is you have people who know you, who remind you of who you are when you get off track. And what if the ability to analyze your day and the way you've been working recognizes that that's one of your values and returns you to one of your values from when you get off track for whatever way or another that it happens, or that it contacts one of your friends and says, David really values personal relationship and he could really use a phone call right now. So in other words, it becomes it is aimed towards exactly the value system you just articulated.
And it takes off your shoulders a lot of the annoying friction-filled parts of the day that take you away from love and community and human experience. That's the benevolent version of it.
I guess, although I guess I'm suspicious of anybody who says that this thing, which is fundamentally yet another tool of typing and engagement with a screen or with a microphone in your head, is its basic purpose is to increase my interaction with human beings.
I mean, that's a good set of skepticism to have. Like, we don't know the answer to that yet. I mean, it's not as if there are no technological tools that help you with your human values, right? Like, it's not like you would give back the internet or give back the telephone or...
Plus, just because it's technology doesn't mean you can't use it or aim it towards all the other kinds of human flourishing and things that you're interested in. What are the 5 great walks in wherever you're going, and why are they great? Or if you could give me 5 of the best walks in America with the following criteria: they have to pass a bookstore, they have to pass a coffee shop that sells, oat milk latte, and they have to have a Airbnb within 3/4 of a mile from that thing. You could design your favorite walking path in America by all the criteria you have.
I would like someone to put that specific thing in ChatGPT, by the way.
It also sometimes lies and makes stuff up, like especially if you ask it for the best list, it seems to do that in this weird way, like make up books that don't exist. I mean, we have to talk for a second about how unregulated this is, right? If Bill Gates is anything like correct, and this is this huge change that is barreling toward us, we, in regulatory terms, seem to be completely unprepared for it. And I mean, I'm just going to be alarmist for a second. What if this is like when they were building the atomic bomb or biological weapons or something else super dangerous, and we don't have any kind of regulatory framework for controlling the speed at which it's being developed, right? I mean, there's a survey going on of people who work in labs developing AI, and the median answer they gave for how likely it is that this could like drive humans, I don't know, out of life entirely was 10%. Like, that's not zero. And I don't see the world like preparing for it. And it does seem certainly possible that these models are going to jump the guardrails that they currently have, because once they're out there proliferating and there's any kind of open source access to them, all it would take would be like one person, maybe even accidentally harnessing them to do something which is in their self-interest, but could totally wreak havoc. And I just, the gap between the potential danger and power here and the regulatory and sort of control, the lack of preparation just seems like potentially staggering. And I mean, obviously, I hope I'm totally wrong and this turns into Y2K and it's some nothing burger, but like, it just seems really possible that it could go very awry.
Can I just say, I asked ChatGPT, what is the best walk in Washington, D.C. that passes by a bookstore, a coffee shop, and a record store? Start at Politics and Prose. This independent bookstore has a great selection of books as well as a cafe where you can grab a coffee and pastry. Next, head south on Connecticut Avenue and take a left on Calvert. After a few blocks, you will see Kramer Books and Afterwards.
That is not true. That's false. That's not true. The geography is wrong.
Kramer Books isn't on Calvert Street.
Yeah, it's true. It's not on Calvert. It's on Connecticut.
False.
We've only proved that David is right, John. Oh, well, forget it.
I mean, I assume the addresses are right. But anyway, so that's obviously a thimbleful of what in about a year it will be able to do. Presumably in a year, it'll tell you what's at all of those places, or, you know, if it could measure it against your sucrose intake and suggest exactly what kind of coffee you should get and how much sugar in it.
Right. I mean, right now it's like a really smart, I mean, sometimes it's like a really smart 9th grader. Sometimes it's like a really smart person who prepped for the LSAT, right? It's a particular kind of intelligence that's not that threatening, but it's rapidly improving. Like GPT-4 is really much better than the previous models. That's what gets me.
Let's go to cocktail chatter. Everyone's stunt is ask a large language model to do something for you. We didn't ask a large language model to create a cocktail chatter for us. Instead, we did something better, which is that Bridget Dunlap, who's been our researcher at the Gabfest for 4 years, I think, 4+ years. This is her last week. Bridget's been amazing. She's been an incredible colleague. As a human, she's always like sort of cheerful and engaging and lively. She's been a phenomenal researcher, too. So much of what makes the show work is the work that Bridget has put into it and like that has allowed us to learn things. And she's just delightful. And so as a farewell, Bridget's going to do our first cocktail chatter.
I'm chattering about a 15-minute podcast called Under the Dome, which is put out every week during the legislative session here in Missouri by an organization called Empower Missouri that works on poverty and criminal justice issues. I'm fairly new to Missouri, and the podcast has been an easy way to learn about the legislature and what's going on with policy issues that I care about, but the newspapers may not have the bandwidth to cover regularly. So what they do is they go rapid fire through what happened with the bills they testified about that week or news of what they're supporting or opposing. So it will be like, this is what happened on extending postpartum Medicaid. This is what happened on SNAP benefits. There's a bill to eliminate sales tax on guns, and a legislator tried to amend it to also end sales tax on diapers. I just feel like there's so much in the news here that can make you feel angry and defeatist. So it's great to learn from people who just keep doing the work in a really rough climate and finding possibilities for bipartisan solutions where they exist, and training regular people to be advocates. So Under the Dome is Missouri specific, but worth a listen to one episode for the insight into state policymaking. And organizations in other states have versions of this or do Zoom legislative previews before the session starts. And I just find it really helpful to think about how I can go from being an angry spectator to getting involved in moving things in a better direction.
I love that. I got to find that in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Or David has to come create it through CityCast.
Bridget, thank you so much.
We're going to miss you so much.
Yeah, all you Gabfest listeners, you haven't heard her, but you've heard her and everything that we've done over the last many years, and all of the upside and none of the downside. And man, the number of mistakes she's captured and caught and kept us from making. When you think about the number of mistakes we make, imagine that doubling. There will never be a ChatGPT to replace Bridget.
And the level of care and thought and sensitivity that you have brought, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I've learned so much from you guys.
Emily, what's your chatter?
I have two recommendations. One is for a new book called Madame Restell by Jennifer Wright, which is a story of a 19th century woman who became an abortion provider in New York and super notorious and bold and also kind of tormented. And I've gotten interested in her for my own research purposes. So I'm excited that now there's this whole book. She actually did a lot of writing herself, Madame Restell. And this just looks terrific. I just started reading it, but I recommend it. Just looks like a good, vivid history read. And I also wanted to recommend a new podcast from The Atlantic called Holy Week that is about the week of MLK's assassination. And our beloved former producer, Jocelyn Frank, worked hard on it. It has Vann Newkirk hosting it, who is a wonderful journalist generally and someone whose podcasts previously I've just loved. So I recommend that a lot in anticipation. Holy Week from The Atlantic.
John, what's your chatter?
My chatter is about this lovely little app that I discovered. This is such a kind of me chatter that it's almost like a parody. But anyway, it's this wonderful app called Imprint. And basically, one of the things that I'm constantly struggling against is how not to spend the snacking time in life where you're like waiting in line or you're in the cab or you're doing something, and basically not spend it on social media. Anyway, Imprint has this lovely short version of amazing different parts of human knowledge. Everything from the natural world to economics, to leadership, to relationships, to philosophy. Beautiful little illustrations, all in snackable bite-sized pieces that are not, and this is of course always the key, totally weightless. I mean, some of them are quite powerful, and you can think about them for a very long time, and in fact adapt them into your own life. And so it's been incredibly great. So whenever I get the urge to do something other than be alone with my thoughts while I'm in a cab in traffic, I check out Imprint, and I'm much better for it.
My chatter, this week, the CityCast team gathered or some of us were met in DC, and we went out for a drink on Monday night to Wright Proper, this wonderful brewery in Brookland in Northeast DC, and we've been talking about doing some stuff with them, and it's a great place. Their beer is awesome. And we were met by a cat, and I met this cat, and then I was talking to Thor, who's the owner of Wright Proper, and he was talking about their cat. And there's this amazing program I just learned about in DC called Blue Collar Cats. And maybe this is outside of DC too. It's run by the Humane Rescue Alliance. And what they realized, there are a lot of feral outdoor cats in DC. And that's not great to have a lot of breeding feral outdoor cats. It's bad for the bird population. Cats themselves, there are too many of them after a time. So the Humane Rescue Alliance takes them off the streets, spays and neuters them, and vaccinates them. But these are basically outdoor cats, which are not suitable for adoption. And so what the Humane Rescue Alliance has done is it puts them to work. So it invites you, if you have a business or a home or some structure where you have a problem with rodents and you have outdoor space, you can have this cat. Your responsibility is to feed and water the cat. You don't have to give it internal shelter. It doesn't want to live internally. It wants to live outdoors, but you have to provide it with food and water. But the cat's job is just to be there and get rid of rodents. And this, like Thor was just saying, at the beginning when this cat showed up, it caught a couple of rats and it was bloody, but now there are no rats because rats and mice will just not live where there are cats patrolling. And it's so great. And the cat is there. It's been put to work. It's having a nice life. And the business benefits, it seems like such a fantastic virtuous cycle. So Blue Collar Cats from the Humane Rescue Alliance here in DC. I recommend it. Listeners, you sent us an incredible selection of chat. This was the best week of listener chatters ever. There were about 5 listener chatters. Each one was sort of more personal and more intense than the one before it. And it was very hard for us to choose. But we did have a chatter that we're going to choose. We had to choose a chatter. And it was such a pleasure. And this week it comes from Alexandra Phelps.
Hi, Gabfest. I am an OBGYN training in high-risk obstetrics in Tennessee, where I, my patients, and my colleagues are forced to reckon with the fallout from Dobbs and the state's complete ban on abortion every single day. I wanted to call your attention to a piece by Kavitha Sarana in ProPublica entitled "Doctors Warned Her Pregnancy Could Kill Her. Then Tennessee Outlawed Abortion." The piece is a powerful profile of a brave woman, Miss Hollis, who had a cesarean scar ectopic pregnancy which threatened her life at a time when she could not access the abortion care that would save her and her future fertility. It is also a moving account of the courageous OBGYNs who fought to give her the care she needed and deserved, but were ultimately unable to provide due to legislative interference in medicine. It is a poignant reminder of the real human toll these harmful bans take on patients, families, and the people who are supposed to be taking care of us. As a physician, I think the author did a great job painting a compelling and realistic portrait of what pregnancy care in a post-Roe red state looks and feels like, frequently painful and fraught. Stories like these are worth telling and understanding as states across the country consider legislation to help or hinder abortion access in this new era. Thank you for listening. I hope you check it out.
That's our show for today. The Gabfest is produced by Shana Roth. Our researcher today. And no more Bridget Dunlap. Bridget, Godspeed. Our new researcher who is here is Julie Hugan. We'll learn more about Julie in the future, but we're so excited to have Julie on board too. Our theme music is by They Might Be Giants. Ben Richmond is Senior Director for Podcast Operations. Alicia Montgomery is the VP of Audio. Slate, please follow us on Twitter at Slate Gabfest. You can tweet chatter to us there or email it to us at gabfest@slate.com. For Emily Bazelon and John Dickerson and departing Bridget Dunlap, I'm David Plotz. We'll talk to you next week. Hello, Slate Plus. How are you? There was a fascinating article in the Washington Post by Annie Gowen. It's called Iowa's Sharp Right Turn from Centrist State to Florida of the North. And it's about how Iowa has gone from being a state which voted twice for Barack Obama, which has a long and very distinguished history of prominent Democratic politicians, Tom Harkin most recently, and famously tolerant. It was the third state to legalize gay marriage. It was a civil rights bastion. And it has become a very red state in a very short time. There are no more Democrats representing the state in Congress. It has Republicans I think, have all of the statewide offices except one. And it's just gotten very conservative. They're passing a lot of laws, laws targeting trans people. Big school choice, school voucher bill just has been pushed through. And John, I know you have a deep, deep relationship to Iowa. You've been there a ton. I wondered what you thought of this piece by Annie Gowen.
I don't know. I mean, yes, it's, I guess on the one hand, my first thought is, Iowa is the state where Pat Robertson did well, when he ran for president and didn't do well anywhere else. Ted Cruz beat Donald Trump. It has always had, Mike Huckabee was strong there. It's always had its Republican caucus voters have always had there's been a strong kind of evangelical part of the Republican Party. So on the one hand, it's always had this thread of the rightist part of the right and tinged with some part of the religious part of the Republican coalition. What's up in the air, though, is two things, I think. One is there is a change among rural voters, most pronounced, really, when you go look at Iowa as it voted for Barack Obama, gave him about 51%.
That was just a snippet from our Slate Plus conversation. If you want to hear the whole conversation, go to slate.com/gabfest plus to become a member today.